Hey guys, welcome to Timeline of Humans #1. I really like this lesson. This is one of my favorites that we get to teach in the Montessori classroom. Now, before we start though, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the great stories we've heard before. We started the year with the story of the universe and how everything started from nothing, and the planets and the earth and the sun and all of those things, the particles settling according to their weights and the dance of the elements. There were some really good stories there. And then we moved on and we talked about how the earth formed and the water got a little bit dirty. And then we had the first life, the little microscopic life, the life that you have to look at under a microscope. Now, a lot of time has passed. And when we looked at the timeline of life, we looked at all those different creatures and all those different animals that lived in an environment, and they changed and they grew and they made more of themselves. And eventually we get to the point at the very end of that timeline of life where we see the human. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of pick up from there. And we're going to start looking at the timeline of humans. So let's take a look and see what we have. Now, one of the first things we're going to notice is this right here, which is an ice age, okay? We have ice ages just like on the timeline of life. And if we look down here, do you see this blue line? Okay, this blue line is talking about temperature, and it's pretty cold. But what happens is it warms up, okay? And when it warms up, we have this red line right here. Something else I want you guys to look at is down here. Do you guys see the time? 100,000 years between these two. That's a lot of time. Now, one of the first things you might notice is this human right here. This human doesn't have any clothes on. Well, at this time, humans didn't wear clothes. They didn't know how to make them. They didn't know they needed them or that they would help. But what this human in particular is doing is something very, very, very important. This human is picking up a rock, and they're going to use it as a tool. Now there's a couple different kinds of rocks that they might have used back then, and I actually have a couple examples. One of them is like this, okay? This is kind of like a hand axe. You can hold it like this and you can smash like wood, or you can like dig in the ground. But this would make a pretty good tool, right? Another one, and I just found this on the ground. Another one, this is one of my favorites. I was hiking at Bowl and Pitcher, and I found this laying on the ground. Now, humans don't have big claws. We don't have some of the tools that other animals have. But if you found this, you could see how if you hold it like this, you could dig in the ground really well. You could get to roots, or it would make a good like defense against animal or getting some meat. So we found some pretty good rocks to use as tools. Now as we move along, you can see that we have a human eating some raw meat here. You know, we didn't cook meat at this time. We would find food, we would find berries and nuts and roots, and if we found meat, we would eat it. And as time moved on, we had another ice age, and it got cold again, okay? It got really cold. Let me move some of my stuff over here. Now, as humans continue, we had this period right here where it got really cold. The spots in between here and over here, there's what we call interglacial periods. So there are times between when it got really cold. Now, as we move on, once it got warmer again, humans started to flourish again. And we started using wood and cutting down trees and taking the skin off animals. And we were able to use more of these tools to make it easier for us to survive. And we started doing pretty good. One of the things I like to talk about, let me fix my timeline over here. One of the things I like to talk about is the water right here. Okay, fresh water was very, very, very important for early humans. And well, it's important for most animals, right? You don't want to drink dirty water. And so humans would spend a lot of time by the water. Now, here's where we're getting into something really important. This human here is starting to make more advanced tools. I happen to have some obsidian here, which is what humans would make early tools out of. Now, obsidian is very, very, very sharp if you break it just right. And what humans realized is that if you take another stone that's harder and you hit it just right, you can break off little flakes, and these little flakes are super sharp. They get dull really fast, but they're very, very sharp, and we could use those for a lot of things. Now, as we move along, something really, really important happens. It's probably, I don't know, I would say it's almost important as the stone tools. Maybe they're both on the same level, but we realized we could use fire. Now, before this, fire was something that happened in nature with lightning strikes and such. But when humans realized they could make their own fire, it changed everything. All of a sudden, we could make our own light and our own heat. And we didn't have to go to bed when the sun went down. We could stay up and work with firelight. There was a lot of cool things we could do. We also started using some caves. Now, if you combine fire and caves, what we ended up with is a place where we could be safe. And throughout a lot of human history back here, humans weren't always safe. There were a lot of big animals that, well, if they could catch us, they'd probably eat us. But when we had a cave with fire, we could scare off the animals, stay warm, and stay dry, and it really helped us. Now, as we move on, humans start to get more advanced. You see they're starting to wear more clothing. We figured out how to make clothing. We got better at making fires. I'm not going to talk about everything on here because that's some of your follow-up work. But we eventually get a lot more advanced tools. But something I want to talk about in particular is right here, because this one's very important, especially when we talk about the next timeline. Now, this changes from simply a hand tool, okay, like a hand tool, something like this, or maybe just a sharp piece of this. But when we put it on a stick, when we made a spear, it gave us the ability to hunt and to protect ourselves in ways we couldn't before. We could take a spear and we could throw it, okay? Before that, we didn't really have that ability. And what that meant is that you didn't have to get quite as close to the things that you wanted to hunt. So, pretty cool stuff. Now, when we look here, we have a bone and needle. This was really important as well because we actually started to learn to sew, and we could make really fine tools out of bone as well. There's a lot of stuff on this timeline that you could do some follow-up work on. One of the things I'm going to recommend is that you talk with your teacher and see what kind of work they would like you to do. If you're in my class, we'll talk about it in some of our meetings, but there are so many different research topics you could cover on here. I'll just name a few, okay? Humans finding fire, living in caves, making stone tools, early human clothing, and we didn't even really talk about it, but you remember when we talked about the wood? Humans started to make habitats or houses out of wood as well. Not very advanced, but still some pretty cool stuff. So, I hope you liked this lesson. Make sure you do some follow-up work. Thanks, guys.